Goeienaand, baie welkom by vanaand se uitsending van Fokus. Ek is Lenet Francis Peuren. Suid-Afrikaners klaar die afgelope week steen en been nadat vlak 6 beurtkrag ingestel is. Dit het gevolg nadat 'n groot persentasie van Eskom se werknemers by kragstasies onwettig gestaak het. Boonop het talle opwekkingseenhede ook nog onklaar geraak. Dit het groot druk op Eskom geplaas om elektrisiteit te voorsien. Maar dit is nou reeds 14 jaar sedert beurtkrag die eerste keer ingestel is. Is daar werklike oplossings en kan Suid-Afrika se kragnetwerk ooit herstel? Ons praat nou via Zoom met professor David Nichols. Hy is 'n voormalige senior bestuurder by Eskom wat aan die einde van 2018 afgetree het as hoofkernamptenaar na 34 jaar van diens by die energievoorsiener. En ons praat ook met Gankie Matabane, uitvoerende hoof van die Black Business Council. And thank you gentlemen, both of you, for joining us this evening. Gankie, let's start with you. Why do we find ourselves here and could it have been avoided?
Thank you very much for having us, and good afternoon. I think that there are many other reasons. You'll remember during the Thabo Mbeki time, there was a plan that was rejected, and I think if that was done properly at that time, things would have been different. But there have been inefficiencies and corruption regarding the construction of the new power stations, Medupi and Kusile. If you look at the budget, the cost just ballooned, and the international companies that were busy with the power stations were never taken to tasks. They continued doing business with government. And they basically put us in this mess because ideally the new power stations should not be giving us issues if they were properly designed and properly done. So that is there. But also, almost 3 years ago, the government appointed the CEO, and then we welcomed that appointment. We had high hopes that things would be better. But in any CEO that has been appointed, you are expecting that after 2 years, we start to see some improvement. And the CEO did indicate when he started that we must give him 18 months, which we did as South Africans. You know, South Africans are very understanding and very patient. But unfortunately, that patient ran out. We'll have expected the CEO to be able to make any difference or stabilize the organization, even if it doesn't improve it, but stabilize it. But instead, we are seeing the worst load shedding in the history of South Africa and the history of ESCOM. So I think those are some of the contributing factors that make us where we are. So we need to find a solution.
Before we talk about solutions, and before I ask Professor Nichols to give me his opinion, so are you also some of those parties that are calling for the resignation? You support that, the resignation of Andre de Ruyter?
Yes, and then our call is not based on anything. We've got nothing against de Ruyter as a person. We just looking at the data that we have. The data indicates that last year we had the highest number of load shedding. This year is going to be worse. So the data that is there shows us that even after 18 months that we have given him, he has not been able to manage to improve the organization or even stabilize it. So when we have a CEO like that who gets paid every day for what he's supposed to be doing, which is provision of electricity, and he's not able to do that, he shouldn't be there. We should get someone else who's more experienced who will be able to do that. It was an opportunity for him to redeem himself because he has not done well at NAMPEC, he has not done well at Sasol. This was a huge opportunity that he lost. And also what we've been appealing to the president is that the president needs to do something, because if he doesn't do something, his presidency and his legacy will also be known as the president who brought the country to his knees and its economy to his knees. The economic recovery will never happen. And he'll be known as that president where we had the highest load shedding ever in the history of the country.
Professor Nichols, there are mixed reactions to this call that under director should resign. I'm interested to know what you think, being a former manager, and also the argument that director inherited a lot of these problems that he's trying to solve today.
I'm not going to get involved in the discussion of whether or not the CEO of Eskom or the board should resign or be changed. I think that we've got to recognise there's something very fundamentally going on. It's not just here in South Africa, it's also elsewhere in the world. That in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a view that the old model of a centrally controlled, regulated utility was archaic and was a dinosaur to be replaced by a drive for the free market to meet the demand. And what we're seeing across the world, and it's not just here, is that decision led to Eskom, for example, not committing to any power stations in the late 1990s. It's worth bearing in mind that Eskom had completely dissolved its engineering groups and its project management groups in the late 90s because of instructions that no stations were going to get built. And Eskom went from having no plans to build anything at all, and nobody in the company whose job description included new builds, to being on site with bulldozers for the two largest projects possibly in the world, but certainly in the Southern Hemisphere. And mistakes were made, there's no question, but that's almost expectable. I think what we're seeing now across the world is this model that the free market is somehow able to meet the demands of countries, given the long-term planning of power systems, is being shown up. I mean, the Australians 2 weeks ago actually collapsed their entire market and took over the entire grid system and the entire power system by edict. In UK, half the distribution companies have gone bankrupt in the last 18 months. And the price of power in Europe is now going through the roof, in my opinion, largely because of the market model they put in place. It's very fashionable, but I'm not sure it actually works. And that led to Eskom stopping its build program in the 90s and not being in a situation to carry on. And we're now in a situation where we can clearly see that the old Eskom stations, with lack of support, are running into reliability problems. And there's nothing new coming in, except for Medupi, which are having the classical, what I call bathtub burn-in problems. Every Eskom coal station had similar, not quite as bad as these two, but they all had problems similar when they first started up.
I want us to talk in our next segment a little bit about maintenance, and also there are many rumors that there are groups of people, a group of people wanting to sabotage what's happening at Eskom. I want to interrogate that in a moment. But you've been able to surely look at the plans that have been put forward over these years, Professor Nichols. Is there legitimately an effective plan that can get us away from this trajectory that we've been on?
I don't presently see one. All organizations have to have three plans. One plan is a vision, a well-structured vision of where you're going to be in the long term. In Eskom's sense, that's 2040, 2050 time period. What is going to meet demand there? And it can't be a hand waving of somebody will invent something. That's not a good technique. It must be weird. The second plan you have to have is one that says, how am I going to keep my business functioning today? And that has to be a credible plan. And then lastly, you have a transition. A third plan is the transition of how you move from where you are now to where your vision is going to be. And I am hearing much discussion of the transition plan. I'm hearing almost no discussion of what does the long term actually look like to keep the lights on? And what is the short term plan to keep the lights on? And I'll be honest, at the moment, I see it as being quite odd that Eskom is committing to shut down Komati this year. That's a 1,000 megawatt power station. It's not reliable, it's very old, but it still makes power to some extent. And we are in the middle of a process which says nobody is reconsidering the strategic plan to decommission all the coal stations not that I'm saying that they're environmentally good or they're cost effective, but at the moment we're seeing that there are balances in every decision made, and maybe we should be keeping the coal stations on longer and looking at how we can maintain them for another 5-10 years while whatever new is coming online. And I see pictures of wind turbines and solar panels on the TV in that moment, and my comment is, I'm not sure how solar panels help at its evening peak when the sun's gone down.
Yeah, let's talk about that in our next segment. We've got opportunities to still discuss that. Moenie weggaan nie, ons is nou terug en dan praat ons verder oor die uitdagings met Eskom hier in Suid-Afrika. Bly ingeskakel. Baie welkom terug hier by Fokus. Beurtkrag is nou al 14 jaar lank deel van Suid-Afrikaners se lewens. Kan die netwerk enigstens herstel word dat die lewe kan terugkeer na normaal? En wie sit agter hierdie beweerde sabotasie van die netwerk? Ons praat via Zoom met professor David Nichols, voormalige senior bestuurder by Eskom, en ook met Gankie Matabane van die Black Business Council. Gankie, I'm curious to know what you think of how Eskom has handled this crisis and whether you see an effective plan. Professor Nichols referred to a short-term and a long-term plan, but there's no clear direction of where we are going.
Yeah, I agree with Professor Nichols, because we do interact with ESCOM, we do interact with government at various levels, but what we see is firefighting. That's why you wake up is level. What stage 1 in 5 minutes time is
Yes.
stage 3, in another 5 minutes is stage 2, another 10 minutes is stage 6. They don't seem to be doing what they are what they're supposed to be doing. And I think maybe as part of the solution, if you look at the board, they don't have people who are experienced like Professor Nichols, because the board is the one that's supposed to be helping management to monitor the plans. But when you look at the depth of the current board, you don't see someone who's got that experience who can say, where is the plan for today? Where is the plan for tomorrow? Where's the plan for next week? Because when you look at the annual report of ESCOM, July is got the highest demand for electricity. And then hence, when they were blaming the strikes, one was not able to believe what they were saying, because we had load shedding even before the strikes. So the strikes was not necessarily the cause of the load shedding. And now we're in July, we're going to reach the peak. Chances are things are going to get worse. So we need people who can have clear plans, who can be able to implement, and people who can be able to do proper maintenance. Because when you, just to give an example, when you have a car, you do maintenance, you are expecting that you can drive that car from here to Cape Town, and it won't give you problems. If it gives you problems, that would be an exception case.
Hanky, I'm going to interrupt you there.
Most of the
I want to hear what you have to say in response to Andre de Ruyter in the past has said that there are groups of people that are intentionally sabotaging some of the power stations and their greater vision. Do you buy that argument?
Yeah, I don't buy it, because when you are a CEO, you have to identify the risks and come up with mitigating factors. You don't sit there and complain and blame everyone else except for yourself. You take the responsibility, because you apply for the job. No one came to you with a gun and say, take this job. You have to have plans. All the industries, if you look at them, if you look at the cell phone industries, people are stealing the batteries at the towers, but they don't throw their hands in the air and not come up with a solution. It's the responsibility of the well-paid CEO, for that matter, to be able to come up with the mitigating factors. So whether it's true or not, those things should have been dealt with by the CEO. You have to come up with mitigating plans. You have to deal with those risks. We have to foresee those risks and then be able to prevent those things from happening, instead of blaming everyone, blaming state capture, blaming this thing forever. That for us is not. It's not a plan that can be bought. It's not something that we can believe, because they are trying to say it every day so that everyone can then start to believe it. I don't think it's a credible information.
After the break, we'll talk a little bit about that. Bly ingeskakel, ons het nog baie vrae, veral ook oor hoe hierdie netwerk ooit indien enigstens gaan herstel. Ons is nou terug. Dis die vraag op almal se lippe. Gaan Suid-Afrika se ligte ooit weer kan brand sonder beurtkrag? Ons sit nou ons gesprek voort met professor David Nichols, 'n voormalige senior bestuurder by Eskom, en met Kangi Matabane van die Black Business Council. Professor Nichols, City Power informed us this week that this is new terrain for them. They don't know how to manage stage 6, and we hear that we are headed for stage 8 as well. Can the system in the long term ever really recover with all this, then it's on, then it's off? I think Kanki was explaining, we don't know. Are we on stage 2? Are we now back to 4? It's confusing and it's mentally draining. What do you say, sir?
Oh, that's a whole pile of questions. I think my first comment would be that understand time frame of power generation. Decisions made 20 years ago or longer are now coming home to roost because the age of the machinery is becoming an issue and they haven't been refurbished and replaced. So can we fix it? Absolutely. This country's got to start building power stations to meet the needs of the people, not the needs of the financiers, and drive that process on to build plants. Is that going to happen very quickly? No. The only thing we've got now that will enable us to bring plant onto stream and limit load shedding is to improve the availability of the eskom fleet. And that is a simple answer. Eskom is currently sitting with an availability of about 60% or less, which is quite unbelievable. If you'd told me 10 years ago when I was an eskom we'd ever get down to 60% availability, people would have thrown bricks at you in the building. It's to recover that is the key issue. And I come back to it, the idea that we are decommissioning coal stations, however bad they are, it worries me. My answer is we've got to, there's things we can do in the short term, but the basic answer is we need to build the plant to meet the economy of the country. And we have, Eskom predicted in the 1990s that we'd run out of power in 2007, based on 25 years of stable load growth. And since 2007, there has been no economic growth, not because of anything else in my view, but if you're going to build a large industrial plant and there is no electric supply to it, you don't build it. So the new heavy industry has not been built. South Africa should be sitting, if you look at the trend line from 82 to 2007, 25 years, we should now be over 50,000 megawatts peak. And that means this country has got 30,000 megawatts of non-heavy industry. Heavy industry should be there and employing us. So the mines are closing down because there's no point digging a hole in the ground if you can't use it. If you're running 4 shafts and one shaft isn't being used because you've got no power, you don't dig a 5th shaft. That's the problem the economy's got. And it isn't a question of waiting for the economy to catch up with the demand. It's a question of building adequate capacity to give confidence to heavy industry that they can build plant with 10, 15-year view of power being there. That requires us to build, I'm afraid to say, classical big power stations. The renewables haven't hacked it anywhere in the world. If you look at the Germans, at the moment, they've got 120 gigawatts of renewable plant in Germany, and they still there's still crisis because there's no Russian gas coming in. So I'm afraid I'm an old-fashioned engineer. I've been on the real plants, and while there is a place in the system for renewables, it is not going to replace that evening peak demand.
Can he just wrap up for me then, short-term interim interventions? Surely the resignation of Andre de Ruyter is not going to solve our problems tomorrow.
Yes, it won't solve it tomorrow, but we need to get the new CEO and the board, people who can bring us credible plans plans that are implementable for short, medium, and long term. And then we'll give them time, we'll give them enough time to implement that. Because remember, in the National Development Plan 2030, for us to deal with the unemployment rate that we have, the serious unemployment rate that we have to create 11 million jobs by 2030. And 90% of those jobs are supposed to come from small business. But at this rate, taking into consideration the impact of COVID, the impact of the riots that happened in July last year, the impact of electricity supply, those numbers are basically a dream, which means that the objectives of the National Development Plan are not going to be met. Because as we speak now, a lot of small businesses are closing down. If you're running a hairdresser, so a hairdressing salon, if you're running a funeral parlor or a student accommodation or those type of things, you really can't, because you have people coming to work, but they can't work.
Yes.
Because there's no electricity. So we're basically, eskom is basically reversing the intentions of the National Development Plan.
Unfortunately, our time. And unfortunately, our time is up, and we can't continue this discussion. But thank you so much, Hankie Matabane and Professor Dave Nichols, for your availability tonight, discussing this very serious problems that we're experiencing with power and load shedding in South Africa. Thank you again. Onthou, dit is ongelukkig al vir vanaand. Indien jy nou wel vanaand weens Beurtkrag nie na die program kon luister nie of kon kyk nie, Fokus is steeds op YouTube beskikbaar. Jy soek net onder Fokus, SABC en die datum van vanaand se uitsending. Jy kan ons ook volg op ons Facebookblad by Fokus SABC of jy kan ons volg op Twitter by Fokus ZA. Ons hoop jy kan wel volgende Woensdag aand om 7 uur weer by ons aansluit hier op SABC 2. Baie dankie vir die saamkyk. Tot dan.